Good morning. I'm Jerry Strauss from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I'm joined today by Heather Galvin from Museum of Science, Boston, and John Higgins from SF MoMA. And this is Transforming Your Building and Technology to Transform Your Visitor Experience. We're going to be discussing opportunities to improve the visitor experience by opening a new building or re-envisioning an existing space, and the technology challenges and successes when rethinking the customer experience in the mix of the physical change. A $1.2 million lobby and box office renovation at the Museum of Science, Boston, back in 2014, transformed the space and the visitor experience. And Heather, Associate VP of Visitor Experience and Operations, will share how uncertainty about the CRM ticketing solution, still to be determined at the time of the renovation, affected the building project and vice versa, and how critical technology became to realizing the vision of the new box office. Back in 2016, at SF MoMA, after a 3-year closure, the newly transformed SF MoMA opens its doors with 3 times more gallery space. John Higgins is SF MoMA's lead software architect, and he'll be discussing how SF MoMA used CRM to transform community engagement and e-commerce, and how CRM changed the visitor experience as the museum reopened. And I'll be talking about the Met Breuer, a new venue for the Metropolitan Museum. It was an opportunity for us to test new aspects of the visitor experience before bringing them to the museum's main building at Fifth Avenue. Some of these experiments included a one-stop shopping experience for our visitors, as well as using tablets for check-in and merchandise sales. And now, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry, and thank you all.
Sure.
In 2013, the Museum of Science planned a major renovation of our lobby and box office. We had high hopes and pretty specific ambitions about what we wanted to accomplish and how technology could better support a different visitor experience. We also undertook this renovation with unknowns about what the technology driving the box office would be. The prior year, a team had been charged with identifying a new enterprise system, but the massive work of just determining the scope, then defining the requirements, vetting possible solutions, let alone implementing a new system, wouldn't be completed in time to inform decisions about the renovation. So ultimately, we opened our new box office nearly 2 years before we were ready to launch our new system. I'm going to talk today about how we did this to ensure that both projects realized our vision for the guest experience. So let's start with some embarrassing before images. So this view shows our lobby looking from the front entry toward the information desk and beyond to the windows overlooking the Charles River and the Boston skyline. Approximately 1.4 million visitors are processed through this space annually. Note the floor-to-ceiling granite slabs that surround the space in an imposing way. And specifically, note this bank of self-service ticket kiosks. This bank represents only 2 of the 4 different designs that we had in simultaneous operation. Each had been developed, obviously, at a different point in time with different specifications. And despite being a mismatched hodgepodge that I referred to internally as Kiosk Palooza, these kiosks worked extraordinarily well for the museum for many years. They provided a built-in relief valve for the box office on busy days and a pretty intuitive and quick way for guests to self-serve for ticket purchases or pick up pre-orders. So I also want to draw your attention to and ask you to remember this brick wall hanging out here behind that very large piece of technology that is not functioning. I'm going to refer to that brick corner in some future slides, just as an anchor point. So here's another view of the lobby, zooming in a little closer so you can see the large circular granite information desk or donut in the middle of the lobby. You can also see a portion of the box office here to the right, as well as 2 ticket pickup kiosks in yet another style. And zooming in further, you can see the exhibit hall entrance. These granite tombstone-like dividers set the channels for guests moving from the paid space to the free space. You can also start to see the box office with each cashier station divided by a large granite cube right at site level. Here's another view of that. And you can understand how this impeded sight lines for guests in the queue to see which stations were staffed and available, as well as for the staff to be able to see the queue. These cashier stations were inaccessible for staff completely, and with the exception of one separate but not equal station on the guest side, were also inaccessible to guests and not meeting modern accessibility requirements. Meanwhile, if you were looking for membership services, you needed to head diagonally across the lobby back over toward that brick corner that I referenced earlier and enter the Red Wing tucked around the corner. You would find a completely separate membership booth operation. Membership relied on the fundraising system as its database of record, and the staff and volunteers worked for membership relied on that system for membership sales and service. So a quite distinct operation had developed to support membership separate from the box office. Visitor services staff in more recent years had started selling memberships using the ticket system, but anything more advanced than a basic sale required sending guests across the lobby for support from the team at the membership booth who had access to the other system. Meanwhile, on the technology side, here's as about as good as I can give you to a photo. Essentially, we had products and constituents living in 8 to 10 different decentralized systems with a variety of offshoots and interconnections between them that had grown up over time. Now, some of these systems had served us really very well, but were quite beyond their prime. For example, our ticketing system was Admits 92, and I always like to point out to people that 92 was not a version number, it was a year. So the main goal for our renovation was to modernize the look and feel for the space that welcomed all of our guests and presented the public face of the museum and made that first impression. And while doing so, we wanted to make the space flexible. It needed to support those 1.4 million visitors and that primary function of processing guest flow and entry into the museum. But we also wanted to be able to open it up for evening events. We needed it to function more flexibly. And that challenge called for doing things like installing removable pay barriers and stanchions. And we wanted to open up the lobby. We have this prime site seated on a dam straddling Boston and Cambridge on top of the Charles River with a view to the Boston skyline. But it was completely obstructed by all of those granite and other barriers that we had placed in the path. So opening up this space was where it got tricky. The information desk was going to need a new home. It couldn't stay there in the middle. And in order to relocate it, we opted for a plan that would integrate membership and move membership off that brick corner, integrating membership at the box office. In theory, we felt that with new technology, all member service should be supportable by the same staff in the same location, working from the same system. And this was the first leap of faith that we made, not knowing what the solution we would select would be, the technology solution. So now we needed to figure out how to support all of the business that was going to be displaced from a membership booth that would be closed. And we still needed to get those self-service ticket kiosks, Kiosk-Palooza, moved out of the main lobby in order to open up that space. We began imagining a possibility of replacing our freestanding kiosks with a different model. and started asking, would it work if every window at the box office could function either as a staffed station or in self-serve mode interchangeably, so that every single window in the real estate under our purview could essentially be always on, always functioning in support of guest service. We also expected that we could minimize the need for ticket pickup for advanced reservations by using modern digital ticket fulfillment. And these were the next leaps of faith that we took, again, not knowing exactly what our system would be or how we would make it work. We decided to plan a renovation on the concept of dual-use box office windows. We also committed to making every station accessible completely, both for staff on the staff side and for guests. So a universal design solution instead of a solution in which only one or two windows met accessibility requirements on the guest side. In order for our renovation decisions to succeed, absorbing membership and self-service kiosk traffic into the box office, our technology solution had to enable and encourage more self-service beyond just those self-service kiosks. And this was a commitment that we decided had to drive the requirements for our system solution. So how did we do it? First of all, we fed requirements between the two teams, knowing what was non-negotiable on the tech side that had to be accommodated on the renovation side and vice versa. We also had overlapping personnel on the two teams to support communication and decision-making. My boss, the Senior VP for Visitor Experience and Operations, led the renovation team, and I was a part of that group. I led the system selection and implementation team as a co-lead with IT and provided that overlap between the two groups. We rolled up our sleeves to sort through which things we could lock in on and commit to as permanent and unchanging, and which things were still too uncertain to drive renovation decisions. For example, we looked at the compatibility of our ticket printers against all of the possible tech solutions that we were considering and determined that we could, in fact, build the custom shelving and desk units on the staff-facing side to support those printers, that we would continue to use those, that we could cut through the counter for the ticket spitters as we installed that. But there were other things we determined were still too uncertain. We knew we couldn't yet lock in on what the customer-facing screen would be, what its placement would be, what the credit card terminals, for example, would be. And when uncertain, instead of cutting through the counter or installing devices permanently for existing technology, we devised creative temporary solutions. For example, industrial strength Velcro had more than one application in our temporary solution until we knew more and could commit. So on the technology side, we lived for a while with the new space hosting the old system, and staging and sequencing became a really important puzzle and strategy in this process. We moved the membership staff to the box office, but had them continue to work for membership in the old system, in the separate fundraising system, until we were ready to launch the new system, at which point we then integrated that staffing fully into visitor services. We lived for a while with the old technology in the new space. As you see here, these are single-facing stations in the newly renovated space with the pole display on the guest side. We also moved Kiosk Palooza to the dogleg wall. So we obscured with a black curtain some of the stations in the newly renovated space and put up a self-serve ticketing sign behind them as a temporary solution until we were ready to launch our new CRM system and our custom kiosk application. So let's shift now to look at what we implemented in terms of technology. We replaced that complicated web of decentralized systems with the adoption of Tessitura, an enterprise-wide solution. We brought together all of our offerings, functionality, and constituents to power ticketing, fundraising, membership, and education program reservations. We used the Tessitura API and worked with our internal web team and external API developer to build a responsive, integrated online ticketing purchase experience, so guests had the ability to add tickets to their cart throughout the museum website. Using that API, we also built a custom kiosk application for ticketing, membership, member pass use, and ticket pickup for those who prefer paper tickets to digital. We launched it at all of those dual-facing box office windows, so all 18 windows could function at all times, either staffed or self-serve. And this completed the vision that we had originally dreamed up for how the box office renovation could change service in that space. We also reckoned with and did away with handling fees for online and phone reservations. We made the case that encouraging people to self-serve on mobile devices had to come without penalty. We could not encourage people to step out of the box office line and self-serve and then hit them with fees for doing so. We made a business case that we could replace lost revenue from fees. First of all, we would capture more customer data as a result of increasing kiosk and web transactions. And second, by incorporating an optional add-on contribution into the ticket purchase path. We argued that this was a much better fit for the museum, both operationally and philosophically, in terms of meeting the museum's larger purposes. More than 20,000 guests made add-on contributions totaling $60,000 in our first year. We also tackled member service to make sure that the removal of the membership booth was not viewed as a lack of commitment to membership, and to help manage the volume of business we were shifting to the new box office. We used the new system to enhance member service in a variety of ways. First, and obviously, we equipped all of the box office staff with the tools that they needed to handle member service fully, not just with basic sales. We replaced paper passes that members had to redeem in person for tickets to the IMAX or Planetarium, for example, with an electronic version that they could use any channel, online, at kiosks, by phone, as well as in person. And we enabled membership sales at kiosks, which was something we had not done with the old Kiosk Palooza solution. This was new, and we saw more than $200,000 in membership sales completed on kiosks in our first year. So shifting now to show you some of the photos of how things turned out. Did I miss something? Sorry. So here's our new fully accessible, modernized box office with dual-facing stations, enabling staffed service as well as self-service. When the staff member logs in on their side, that customer-facing screen shifts seamlessly into becoming the poll display for the station. When that staff person logs out, it shifts back into self-serve kiosk mode. That brick corner with that hulking piece of technology that was out of service is now a beautiful, updated, accessible, and very functional information desk. The membership booth just around the corner there is also gone. And finally, the result of being able to make these changes, integrating membership, moving the information desk, shifting our model of self-service, a spectacular, airy, open, updated lobby and museum entry with views to the Charles River Gallery experience and to the Charles River and Boston skyline beyond. And with the implementation of these removable pay barriers, we saw the ability to use the space in more flexible ways, such as this gorgeous private event in the space after hours. These projects were complex and full of uncertainty and interdependencies that challenged us in ways we definitely did not expect, but we're very happy with how things turned out, and I am happy to have had a chance to share them with you today. Thank you.
And now John from SF MoMA. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Serra. Good morning. I am from SF MoMA, and we were in a very envious position, which I think a lot of people would be quite jealous of. I've been able to close our museum for 3 years for a very ambitious expansion plan. So this is a view of our museum as it was in 2013. This is what we call the Bota building. It was built in 1995, and it had served the museum very well. But we were just really running out of space as the collection grew. We didn't really have the exhibition space that really supported the vision of the museum. So,
You can just sit down.
oh, is it?
Yeah, just sit down.
Okay. So this is the this is the building in 2016. You see, we retained the border building and kind of expanded behind it, and it's not easy to see from this view, but it was a considerable expansion, and we reopened in May 2016. It was a $300 million project. And this is another view, which perhaps you can kind of see the expansion a little more clearly. This is the back of the building. All of this was mostly new exhibition and gallery space, and kind of just down there at the bottom, you can see there's the Richard Serra sculpture called Sequence, which was a fascinating project in of itself, in that the sculpture was put in there and the building was pretty much built around it. So this is some just some details of what the expansion actually gave us. So we were able to almost triple the amount of exhibition space that we had. Previously, 70% of the space we had was just for special exhibitions, and we only had 30% of the space for showing our permanent collection. When the new building opened, that was pretty much reversed. So we had 70% of our new gallery space was for our permanent collection. We could show off a lot more of what we had in our collection, and then 30% of the new space was really given over for special exhibitions. And so the museum itself was very much transformed in what we were able to exhibit and how we were able to exhibit that. And so I guess what I'm going to be talking about is kind of how we did that and how that changed the visitor experience using CRM. So this is a traditional view of what a CRM platform allows you to do. I mean, we're engaged with all of these various aspects of our community. And what I'm going to talk about is just kind of how this impacted some of these different areas, some of these different parts of the community as we implemented our CRM plan. So prior to opening our new building, we didn't really have a cohesive CRM system. We had a lot like was shown in Heather's slide, many different systems, all serving their own individual purposes and functions, with flaky integrations between them that sometimes worked, sometimes not. Nobody really knew if they were working or not. And so we realized that what we want to do with CRM was something that we'd traditionally done and that most museums are very good at, is using CRM to engage with members and donors. That seems to be the principal thing that CRM is used for. Which is a very important use of CRM, and it's something that we intended to keep on doing. But what we also wanted to be able to do is to use CRM much more to engage with our visitors, because as we closed, we realized we didn't actually know that much about our visitors. We knew our members, we knew our donors, we knew people who had a previous relationship with SF MoMA, but the visitors, we weren't really getting as much information about them and engaging with them in the ways that we could do. So the goal that we had when we reopened for visitors was that we wanted to be able to allow visitors to come and create an account with SF MoMA, to be able to purchase tickets, to be able to tell us about the sort of things that they're interested in, and to be able to make purchases online and do a lot of the things that members can do, except we are much more engaged with them. And this really took quite a bit of a mind shift for the organization, because previously we've been much more focused on membership and donors and those people who we already knew about. And as we were kind of looking at what we could do with this a much more cohesive CRM strategy, we kind of identified some of the key things that we wanted to be able to do. And as we were kind of very aspirational in thinking what it is we'd like to be able to do when the museum reopened, it became clearer that our strategy required a much more broader conversation within a lot of different departments within the museum. So we ended up talking to external relations, to development, to marketing, communications. IT was obviously very heavily involved. And that brought everyone together, and we just had a lot of meetings and talked about everything that we hope we'd be able to do, and kind of identified what it is that we thought would be a great way to use CRM when the museum actually opened. And so a part of that conversation, that kind of led to how it is that we're going to have some kind of governance over CRM. And so we identified these three groups and kind of set them up and tasked each group with kind of very specific tasks. So we have the executive group, which are making the sort of broad strategic decisions. They're kind of finding the money to fund this. They're finding how we're going to allocate resources. And then the stakeholders kind of figuring out how it is we're going to do this, just engaging with all the sort of various project management tasks that are required. And then the user groups themselves who were going to be using this system, and so kind of making sure that we were hearing their voice and they were very involved in this entire process. And so from this governance, we then identified what it actually mean when the museum reopens, about how we know if we've actually succeeded. So this slide is showing what our goal was and currently kind of where we are with each of these goals. So the goals were actually set while we were closed. So some of these things were kind of unknown. We just kind of made the best guess at that we could. But we very much wanted to be able to have some sort of tangible measurement of the impact that CRM was having. So our prospect list, see, we're kind of fairly ambitious in thinking we could grow that to 1.2 million. It's at 800,000, which is pretty good for what it was before. The online ticket purchases, we were hoping to get to 20% of being able to do that, and that's all integrated with our CRM system. And we're actually, that's now closer to 40%, and it's still growing. So that's worked out really well. And the email communication opt-in is doing okay. There's definitely some things that we can kind of improve there. And the online store purchases, this was, I think, a sort of unexpected benefit of using CRM, in that being engaged more with visitors and letting them have an account, and encourage them to kind of make use of that account for when they're shopping online in our store, actually created an enormous increase in those visitors who are actually making purchases, which was really good news. So the timeline of how we did this and kind of what happened during our 3-year closure, and 3 years sounds like a really long time. Like to have a museum closed for 3 years sounds like, you know, you could just kind of take your time. But this just flew by so quickly. So as soon as we kind of identified what it is that we wanted to do with CRM, kind of just sending out RFPs and talking to vendors, and then going through the process of actually migrating all of these disparate systems that existed before into one cohesive system, we kind of went down this list very, very quickly indeed. And we found that the biggest thing for us was just getting clean, good data from our old CRM system, which was we were using Razor's Edge into Testatora. We found that our data was pretty bad. We didn't really know how bad it was until we started doing this project. So we as soon as that became an issue, we kind of invested pretty heavily in data hygiene. We engaged with some vendors that could help us with that. And we pretty much kept on track with what this projected timeline was. So the museum actually reopened in May 2016, but prior to reopening, obviously there were sort of key dates that we wanted to let people know we were reopening, and we wanted to be able to sell tickets online for the reopening. There was going to be some special exhibitions. So we actually had that for late 2015 was a go-live date for the website, and being able to offer memberships online and being able to sell tickets online. So we achieved all of this in a rather stressful late 2015, early 2016. But everything worked, which was kind of amazing. But it went pretty well. We kind of stuck to this timeline. It was great. So this is a somewhat impossible to read slide. But what I'm trying to show here is how we use Testatora, our CRM system, and kind of really made that the hub of everything that the museum does to interact with our community and our audience. We wanted it to be the central system of pretty much everything that we do. So we built some custom software around it ourselves. So it started in different phases. So we had Testatora itself, which has a great API and a great range of functionality available to it. But we wanted to make that simpler for when we work with various vendors and other software developers. We didn't want to have to make them learn the Testatora API time and time again. So instead, we built our own custom middleware around Testatora that really simplified a lot of the very common interactions. Like for somebody to purchase a membership just using the native Testatora API it was a couple of steps. There was a lot of data. You had to kind of understand how Testatora recognizes a constituent and some of the terminology of Testatora. And we kind of abstracted it and made that really simple. We just created a purchase new membership endpoint in our API where we just take all the data that we need, some first name, last name, address, payment method, and had that interact with Testatora. So we were then able to use that middleware in a much more secure way. We could host that ourselves on a server within the museum. It's publicly available. Anyone can get to it. We can share it with whoever we like. But more importantly, we kind of know who's using it. We can sort of monitor the traffic to that. We can just see how it's being used and just focus all of our sort of alerting and tracking on that system. So we're not worried about monitoring Testatora itself, which is a somewhat complex system spread over many servers, which is difficult to sort of measure how well it's doing. And instead, we're focused on this middleware layer, which we can see the load on that server, we can kind of see the traffic on that, we can see how that's doing, and kind of use resources on that as we need to. And after we started doing some of the simpler things, like we were selling memberships online, we were selling tickets, we were selling tickets for events as well as exhibitions, and then we wanted to do kind of more ambitious things. So that then grew into what we call the business logic layer. And I appreciate these are not the most poetic names for technology. But this business logic layer then it encapsulates a lot of the sort of really fuzzy logic that any museum comes up with, any of the sort of weird business rules, like, you can only purchase a child's admission ticket if there's one adult, or you can't have more than 3 children, and just all of the sort of rules that are very difficult to implement in software, especially if you're doing this over and over again in different places. Like if the website is doing this, we have a mobile app as well where you can purchase tickets. And so instead of having all of these vendors and other developers having to replicate and understand our business logic, we just put it all in one place. Now we have this business logic layer, that talks to the middleware, that talks to Tessitura, and then we can just let any system we want just talk to this business logic layer. And it works really well, and it gives us a place where we can expand and build on that. We have something where now if somebody comes up with some weird new business rule, like we can only sell certain memberships on a certain day of the week, then we can do that. That's pretty easy to do. And so using the system, so currently we have this connected to the website, makes use of this business logic layer. We have a mobile app that I mentioned that makes use of this business logic layer. That allows us to have things like digital membership cards on an app. And then our store as well, our physical museum store, is also integrated with Tessitura, which means that if you're a member and you get your 20% discount, you can show up, you can kind of show them your membership card. We scan that, Tessitura says, yes, you're a member, and then you get your discount. And also the online store as well is able to authenticate if you're a member or if you're a visitor and have an account with SF MoMA, and let you shop online, and then we know who you are. You can store information about yourself. You can, kind of store your shipping address if it's different to your billing address, things like that. So this is this kind of highlights what it is that we do with Tessitura, and it also gives us the scope to just keep on sort of building out various bits of functionality. We have a place to do that. We're not constantly trying to figure out like, oh, we've got to add something on because somebody's asked for some weird thing. It's all in one place, and it's very simple to use. So I spoke earlier that one of the issues that we had when we were getting Tessitura up and running was the quality of our data. And so we identified what it is that we wanted to do to make sure that we had a really solid data governance plan. And one of the things we really wanted to avoid was several years from now being in the same position we were when we migrated this data. That the data was full of sort of half-completed records. It was full of duplicates. We had multiple people in there, sort of many times. I'm sure that's pretty familiar. So we did various things to make sure that we are constantly monitoring that data, that we're keeping it clean, that we're getting rid of duplicates as best that we can, and just really keeping the quality of the data as a very central thing to what we're doing with Tessitura. Getting a bit out of time, sorry. It's, so these are some of the costs and challenges. So one of the things that we found was that there was a kind of balance. As we were looking at projects and things we wanted to do with CRM, we were sort of constantly evaluating, can we compromise on some functionality to make for a simpler integration? Are there things that we can do to avoid building custom solutions? And also just simple sort of things like how are we keeping a track of how all of this is working? And the aspirations that we have for CRM and e-commerce in particular, that's because that's been quite a success, is that we wanted to be able to sort of measure the efficacy of marketing campaigns. We're able to do that. We're able to use really simple dashboards so that people within the museum can kind of see what's going on. They can see our visitors and see our memberships. That when a member calls, We have an integration with our calling system that identifies their number when they call, and whoever answers that call knows they're a member and automatically sees that relationship they have with SF MoMA. And we really get a very comprehensive view of the people now who are coming and visiting SF MoMA, as well as our members, and we're able to gather all of this data, and the next phase of using CRM is really to be able to drive that to make some of the strategic decisions that we need to make in the future. So it's been incredibly useful. So thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think at the Met, we had it pretty easy. All we did was take over an existing building as opposed to completely reconstructing SF MoMA and even Museum of Science Boston. So the Met Breuer is part of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We're the largest art museum in the country with 17 curatorial departments and over 7 million visitors annually. So we wanted to add a new museum to the Met's network, but we didn't think it would be a very easy task. First, we had to restore a landmark building, the former home of the Whitney, in a short time frame, and then we had other projects going on concurrently. But we wanted to provide a great visitor experience with hardware and applications focused on our visitor and a strong project management and change management practices. The Met was founded in 1870 to provide art to the public and art education. It's housed on Fifth Avenue in this grand building. The Met Cloisters opened in 1939 and houses our medieval art collection. It's up on the Hudson River, uptown, overlooking the Palisades. Quite lovely. So why the Met Breuer? Why did we need another venue? Well, we wanted a new museum focused on modern and contemporary, and to provide for additional space while redesigning our modern galleries at our main building. And when space became available on Madison Avenue, a few blocks away, we decided to go for it. The building was opened in 1966 for the Whitney, designed by Marcel Breuer. And when they decided to move to the High Line, their new home downtown, we decided that a modern and contemporary space a few blocks away made sense. It's a landmark building, so we needed to retain the building's historic fabric and reuse elements where possible and repair any damage to its initial luster. So the interior provides a simple background for art and flexible space. And as Breuer himself said, the exterior radiates a sense of purpose, distinction, and invitation. And to do that, he created an inverted stepped pyramid shape. And you can see how the galleries become bigger and bigger in terms of the footprint of the floor, starting from the lobby, going all the way up. So here's the restored lobby with the iconic lighting fixtures and an open, welcoming space for art visitors as they enter from Madison Avenue. And the galleries are open, large, with flexible walls to accommodate different types of modern art objects. We have a full shop in the building and a lovely restaurant down in the atrium level facing Madison Avenue. So our target date was March 18th, and the first show was Unfinished Thoughts Left Visible, about works of art that weren't quite finished, and Nazreen Mohammadi, a South Asian artist. We also use Tessitura, and we were in the middle of our CRM initiative as these guys were implementing Tessitura for admissions, membership, development, education, concerts. So we too were looking for that CRM type of view. This was pretty controversial. This was our iconic M, and we went to this. You know, the press, we had some mixed reactions, but we went for it, and it was, you know, I guess, a more modern look. So we felt that solid technology, great infrastructure, and hardware and apps with the visitor in mind would be critical for our success. And we basically extended our core applications from the main building and cloisters to the Met Breuer just to make it part of the Met family. And of course, we needed great networking to do that, and lots of Wi-Fi at the Breuer. I took a quote from my boss who said, "Outages cost more than the money saved by doing things cheaply." So we really poured a lot of redundancy and excellent architecture into the Breuer to make it stable and resilient. Lots of Wi-Fi on all floors, and we needed to make them pretty discreet and, you know, not easy to see. We restored the flagpoles, but also put Wi-Fi there, and required landmarks preservation approval to do that because it is New York City. We have 2 backups for the network to assure redundancy and always-on capabilities. And we did a bit of a dry run with a TEDx at the Met in 2015. We had 2 venues, Breuer and the Met, and audiences in each venue could see what was happening in the other venue. So we had an opportunity to really test out the network. New hardware included this digital wall in the lobby, new POS, and even an automated cash management device. Not very sexy, but gave us time to do other things and service our customers instead of, you know, cashing out at the end of the day. So the digital wall provides visitor information, exhibition highlights, admissions fees, and it's big enough for video presentations that can be seen from Madison Avenue. New point of sale equipment was streamlined to minimize the footprint and provide more space for everybody. You can see it's not the biggest lobby entrance in the world. We use iPads for line busting, membership sales, and even catalog sales at the entrance to exhibitions. Now, the kiosk app was actually designed by John over here. He's a former Met employee. We call it Higgins. And we use it for a whole bunch of transactions for our visitors. And we implemented these new tall screens for, you know, really nice accessibility for our customers. And there's the sexy cash management machine, but again, it speeds up back office processes. Again, Tessitura really helped out with the one-stop shop concept because we could, process memberships, admissions, concert events, donations, etc., with one system. And we too had about 5 or 6 disparate systems, and it took us 3 or 4 years to bring it all together. One challenge was Tessitura natively doesn't do point of sale retail, but we were able to make it work for a limited number of products, and again, to bring it all into one system. So again, some of the apps included a one-stop shop experience and the ability to sell memberships, admissions, events, everything on one system in one venue. Of course, mobile was critical for line busting and membership sales, as well as merchandise sales. We even needed to develop new ticketing because you can go to all 3 venues on the same day. So we needed to change the way the ticketing worked. It's a bit of a hike going uptown, et cetera, but it's good value. So we needed to hire an entire new customer engagement staff because it was a new building. So training, dress rehearsals, that single service approach were all critical. In the dress rehearsals, we used cue cards with real world scenarios to practice. We did a lot of project planning, started early, defined our scope tightly, and assumed that it was going to change virtually every week, if not every day. A good example of this was we were just going to have distributed merchandise sales, and 6 weeks before opening, the VP of merchandise said, "Oh no, I want a standalone store in the building." So, you need technology to do that, so that was quite a challenge, but we did it. Again, change takes a lot of work, dress rehearsals, training, a soft launch for members. Leading up to our hard launch, we made the date, March 18th. There's our newly reelected mayor at the ribbon cutting ceremony, as well as our president, Dan Weiss. He's a very tall guy. And basically, I think with great planning, a focus on maintaining the integrity of the building, great hardware and great apps, always with the visitor in mind, and always trying to manage change, I think we had a successful opening. And we were able to provide, a single service, easier approach for our customers, self-service if they needed that, agile service like line busting and membership and merchandise sales, and our beloved digital wall to easily see what's going on. Thank you. And I think we have about 5 minutes or maybe 10 for questions, so sir.
Jerry, you touched a little bit on sort of testing and things that you did before opening. I'm curious for all 3 of the panelists, prototyping, whether it was in the systems as well as the physical space that you may have done prior to reopening, and I'm not sure if you guys were completely closed or just partially closed when you were. I'm just interested in how that all worked and any tips or tricks that you've learned after the fact.
Want to take that, John?
At SFM, we were completely closed. The building itself had been gutted, so it was kind of difficult to do that because we had to kind of make a best guess at how we were going to do things like Wi-Fi in the new building and just kind of model that and just sort of tweak that as we started to actually have access to some of the new galleries. then we'd see how our sort of modeling of that matched up to reality, and we could kind of tweak what we were doing a bit. For some of the things like using Testatura for ticketing and for selling memberships on site, again, that was, as soon as we had access to those spaces where we were going to be able to do that, then it was just an intense flurry of activity to kind of get the equipment in there and just kind of see how it worked, make sure everything worked the way that it did. I mean, before we did that, we had obviously mock-ups of everything kind of available. You know, we tested out the various tickets we were going to use, the printing machines, the ticket stock. So we did as much as we could beforehand, but some things you can't actually do until you have access to the building itself.
I just add a little bit on this point because it was so important for us. When we were going through the system process, we reserved a dedicated space for the implementation team that we set up as our space and our space alone for the nonstop meetings and collaborative work that the project took, as well as lab space. So we had dedicated systems set up running Testatura with the printer technology, with everything that we'd be using, the scanners. So essentially we had a mini model of what would happen at the box office that we cycled people through testing cycles and then for training and remediation. And we kept that up and running for several months after we launched as we continued the remedial process before we then disbanded that dedicated space and moved sort of back to our regular offices. That was critical. On the physical side, we also did a lot of prototyping. One of the things that we did that I'm so happy that we did, and I would recommend to everyone, was that we had our exhibit shop build, I think it was the exhibit shops that did it, not the architect, a rough plywood version of what the cashier station mock-up was going to be. And then we had different chairs, and we cycled box office staff through a space where we set that up and asked them to sit at it and use it and give us feedback and made changes so that the space we designed was working for the staff who were going to use it. And it was really because we were trying to implement this universal design solution, which is not easy to do, to make it work on the staff side as well as on the guest side. We really wanted to test that out and think about the reach, you know, for someone in a wheelchair or a scooter from both sides of that space. So I would also really recommend that.
Sir.
All three of you chose Testatura as your CRM system. I'm wondering if anything else sort of came close, or you know, what was like the deciding factor?
Well, for SF MoMA, we did look around at a lot of other solutions. We looked at Salesforce as a potential solution with a lot of customization. But for us, Testatura was the best choice because it really did allow us to do everything that we wanted to do in one system. So it was the memberships, it was being able to sell tickets, being able to manage events, handle donations, just everything all in one place. And that was really important to us. So that's why we chose Testatura.
You know, I was just going to say, you know, Testatura is an interesting combination of it's a CRM and it's got good, you know, business intelligence and reporting capabilities, but it is a straight-ahead transactional system. You know, it sells your admission tickets, it sells your memberships, it manages your donations. So it's got CRM as the end game, but you know, if you need to run a box office with all the attendant requirements, it does that well as well. Oh,
I'll just say we evaluated several other systems. We went through a pretty comprehensive and painstaking selection process, and there really ultimately wasn't anything else that seemed like a good fit. Precisely because we knew we had to have hardcore ticketing capability and membership sales capability, and we wanted the CRM piece, and we wanted to not have to do, I mean, we are doing customization within the Testatura umbrella, but that we wanted something off the shelf that would do those main things for us without having to stitch together multiple systems to get to the outcome that we wanted.
Okay, so I know this is much harder stuff to capture, but have any of your museums given thought to kind of capturing experiential metrics? So in addition to just point of sale, here I bought a ticket there, right? Maybe through the app or something, knowing that, oh, these visitors went to the to go beyond just members and donors into every visitor potentially being managed in that CRM. I think that's a good place you could expand the use of the CRM.
She's smiling, you're doing something.
No, I think they're,
I'm just smiling because it sounds so aspirational. I think for me, part of the learning of my role in this, which maybe is old hat to the people who are more on the IT side, is that a go live and a launch of a system like this is not an event that happens on your go live date, but it is more than a year later, and I would say we are still in the implementation phase. We're still finishing up some of those first phase projects. We knew what was non-negotiable for the go live date, but there's a lot of stuff that's still in process. So that sounds like a dream, but we're not there. So that's why I'm smiling.
Well, we are at SFMOM. We are planning on doing exactly that. What you're describing. I mean, we have a mobile app that has a really interesting sort of audio tour of the collection, and we have wayfinding and beacons within the museum as well, so that we know if you're using our app and you are logged in, if you're a visitor or a member and you have an account in Tessitura, we could sort of just see the path you take through the museum. We could see kind of how long you spend in maybe a gallery, and even down to what you actually look at for what your favorite artwork is if you stop at something for 10 minutes. We haven't fully implemented that yet, because the other side of that is what are we going to do with that data? I mean, we can capture it, but unless we have some sort of a meaningful use that we're going to put that to, we're just going to start amassing a lot of data. I think that there is a lot of value in having that data, and we just need to formulate what it is we're going to do with it. But yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, and thinking about it in terms of, having improving experiences, converting visitors into members, those
Yeah.
kinds of things that would be hopefully the game.
Yeah, so to follow on that question, I was going to ask something similar. In a past life, I was tangentially involved with the exercise at Disney with the Magic Band. And so it was extraordinarily expensive, astronomically expensive, but it's very inspirational. So I throw that to anyone with regards to how can you exploit that kind of data for really meaningful engagement that's truly win-win, like that the customers really love the sorts of services and additional content that can follow from that kind of data analysis, as well as the incredible optimization of services that occurs then on the corporate side. It's really quite inspirational.
So, to follow up on that one. So, at the Open Museum, we have, I've been asked on, getting exactly that, from the ticketing counter, where does the customer go? Do they go to the art? Do they go to the History Museum? Do they go downstairs to Natural Sciences? Or do they go straight to our, whatever the exhibit is, or rotating exhibit is at the time? To which I respond, well, I can't tell you exactly where they're going, but I can tell you where the concentration of people are, because we have free Wi-Fi, and our wireless infrastructure is based on Meraki, and Meraki's got its own built-in beacons. They've got Bluetooth built into it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I can tell you how long people are staying in certain areas, but I can't tell you the paths that they're taking, et cetera, et cetera. And some of the presentations that I've seen today, this week, one of them had to do with, the pathfinding, wayfinding, pathfinding, working with companies like eTour, and seeing, with audio tours, or with, AR tours, or anything like that, that will probably drive a little bit more, insightful of, oh yeah, they're walking this way. Either you're leading them that way, or you're figuring out, oh, you want them to go that way, but they took a right turn somewhere else because, they were thinking, oh, I'd rather see this than what you might think that you want to see. So it's not just, with Tessitura or Serra or whoever the other CRM companies are. It's all a matter of, how do you design your waypoint.
yes.
I'm wondering, along with those types of reflections, and what the participant surveys are from your end, doing things like that, because I hear about the integration of like your membership pass within your app, and then being able to follow that visitor. If we're following a phone, or if we're following something generic, it's one thing, but if we're following someone that uses personal information that we now know,
Yes, very much so. I mean, there's kind of two parts to that. There's making people who come to the museum aware that we're going to do that and give them the ability to opt out of that. That's really important. And there's also just for us as a institution to not give the feeling that we're being creepy and sort of following people around and tracking what they're doing and sending them an email a week later saying, we noticed you really like this painting. So it's kind of two of those things. It's kind of balancing them out, that we want to get the data, but we want to make sure people know what it is that we're doing and give them the ability to opt out. And again, not get too much data that it seems like we're just being a bit sort of weird with people who are coming to the museum.
So it's 11:05, and we went over. We'd be happy to speak to anybody if they want to talk afterwards, but thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.